chartreuse.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
What's your name?
Stuart.
Stuart only?
Yep.
I remember. Just give me your first name. I'll see if I can remember the last.
Ashley.
Ashley. Santa Rosa?
Close.
Close, pretty good. St. Andrew.
St. Andrew. I knew it was one of the saints.
My name is Josh.
Josh. I should know that. Sorry.
My last name is Bowman.
Bowman?
Bowman. B-A-L-L-N-I-K.
Balnick, right.
I took
B-A-L-L-N-I-K.
some tests in your class.
Yeah, I know, right? That's one of the reasons I like to grade exams by hand, is I get to know, remember the names rather than machine grade them. Sometimes I even remember them.
Marlon.
Yeah, Marwan, I know I met with you.
Just pop in the nose and it's like a car.
No, I don't have, I'm finishing this before I have a
Nissan.
There were 3 there.
Georgetta, I know.
Laurel.
Laurel. Drawing a blank.
Oh, yeah.
O-J-A, is that how you pronounce it? Oh, yeah. O-J-A, I remember. And
Katrina.
Katrina.
It's Hollis is my last name.
Hollis, H-O-L-L-I-S.
Yep.
Right. And
Teresa.
Teresa, I should know.
This is a trick question. So.
Well, you're not going to get. You didn't see the example.
Teresa. Did you change your name?
Mm-mm.
No, you never.
Palumbo.
Palumbo.
Yes.
Yeah, could we had another graduate a few years ago?
Not in my family.
I think we did, but it wasn't a relative. I think I've asked that question
Yeah.
before.
Yeah,
No.
Palumbo, what was her name? Forgot her name. Yeah.
I guess Mike is going to come in, but maybe he'll be late. So, Dr. Abramson is going to talk about both his passion for sports and his passion for chemistry, and they come together in a kind of a strange bedfellows kind of way. And so he's given this lecture on performance enhancing drugs in sports for several years. And so I think, Hanley, I will leave it to you. You have 2 hours. You can take a break whenever you want, or you can take questions as you go, or you can ask them to wait till the end. It's up to you.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I've been a sports fan ever since I can remember, going back to probably the age of 5 or 6, when I remember crying when they traded Hank Greenberg away. That's how long ago that was. One of my favorite players. I mean, I've been around so long, I can actually remember when the Detroit Lions won an NFL championship. I mean, that's 59-14. They beat the Cleveland Browns.
Wow.
That's the last time they ever won a championship. Anyway, enough about me. Drugs in sports. The use of drugs in sports probably goes back as long as there's recorded time. We have evidence from even the ancient Greek Olympics that athletes probably used potions and concoctions and whatever to try to enhance their performance. So it's something that's been around ever since sports have been around, probably. In the modern era, there are a number of interesting things that we will kind of look over before we get into the scientific stuff. In the early days of the Olympics, that is the modern Olympics, things were rather laissez-faire, and a case in point was the Olympics, the marathon in the 1904 games, which were held in St. Louis, where the winner was Thomas Hicks, an American. He was starting to flag, getting very tired and exhausted on his way to the finish line. So some of his friends, as he was within a mile of the finish line, some of his friends who were kind of going alongside of him, they administered strychnine to him. In full view of other spectators, he was given a dose of strychnine, a muscle stimulant, of course, or CNS stimulant, I should say, and also a dose of brandy to try to pump him up. And then they gave him another dose of strychnine as he got closer to the finish line. And as he crossed the finish line, he basically collapsed, and there you see him being helped from the finish line. So that was sort of the way things were back then. It was commonly accepted that athletes could be given stimulants. It wasn't exactly frowned upon. Interesting sidelight to this story is that Thomas Hicks actually came in second in the marathon. The person who came in first was later discovered to have hopped a ride in a newfangled machine called an automobile and was disqualified.
What was going on?
Sort of reminds you of, maybe you don't remember, but a runner by the name of Rosie Ruiz in the Boston Marathon a number of years ago took the T for a part of her race and was eventually discovered that she didn't actually run the whole race. Well, so as we move into more modern games, amphetamines became all the rage among athletes, beginning in the 1940s, 1948 Olympics, when amphetamines started to be used, and then in the 1960 Olympics, the tragedy that sort of highlighted the use of amphetamines and why they're bad to use in the Olympics. Knud Jensen, or Knud Jensen, I guess you would say in Danish, collapsed and died during the Olympics, a bike racer. And then a few years later in the Tour de France, Tommy Simpson, a cyclist for the UK in the Tour de France, collapsed and died as a result of taking amphetamines. Amphetamines were very commonly used back in those days. They were used by students to keep themselves awake in case they had to study for oncology exams and stuff like that. And maybe they're still being used, I don't know. But they were commonly used among athletes, certainly. And it was rather open. There were no real restrictions on this. Here's another interesting case, and this is a Canadian runner named Ben Johnson, who won the 100-meter dash in the Olympics in Seoul in 1988. He ran a world record, made the world record in his run, and almost immediately after the race, they had done a urine sample on him and discovered a steroid, stanozolol, actually. And he was disqualified, and this news came out very shortly after the race. And Ben Johnson, in disguise, left Seoul, returned to Canada, and he was disqualified for life from the Olympics, and they tried to disqualify him from all athletic competition, but they didn't succeed in that, in banning him forever in all sports. But anyway, now here's sort of a poignant story. This is a young swimmer, 16-year-old high school kid, Rick DeMont from California. In 1972, the Munich Olympics, he set a world record in the 400-meter freestyle and received the gold medal for his performance. And almost immediately after being awarded the medal, the news came out that they had discovered a drug in his urine. The drug was ephedrine. And DeMont and the U.S. Coach, Olympic coach, pointed out to the Olympic officials that they had reported this, as they were supposed to. They were required to report drug use, even if it's legitimate, because he was an asthmatic. He needed the ephedrine. And so they reported this prior to the race, that he was using a prescription drug for his asthma. Didn't matter. They took away the medal. In fact, to this day, the medal has not been restored to him, even though the IOC about 10, 15 years ago admitted its mistake in taking the medal away. They never gave it back. Interesting. Very recently, he was named the swimming coach at the University of Arizona, by the way. So he has kept a career in aquatic sports. Well, probably when we look at all these examples of drug use in sports, it would be hard to top this one. And that is the systematic use of drugs sanctioned by the government of East Germany in athletic competition. Now, what I show here is the medals, gold, silver, bronze medals, in 3 different Olympics, 68, 72, and 76. You know, comparing the United States, the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, and East Germany. Of course, Germany was once divided, as you probably know, between East and West. The East Germany was part of the Soviet bloc, dominated by the Soviet Union. So if you look at 1968, you see that the U.S. had a total of 107 medals, Soviet Union had 91, and East Germany had 25 medals. Perhaps a little more than you would expect based on population and size of the country, but it wasn't totally out of proportion. But then in the next 2 Olympics, 72 in Munich and 76 in Montreal, notice that the East Germans were almost on a par with the Soviet Union and the United States. And even at that time, I remember people were raising the issue. Why is East Germany suddenly becoming such an Olympic powerhouse? The story didn't really come out until after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when it was revealed that the East German government was systematically not just encouraging, but administering, actually overseeing the administration of drugs and being administered by physicians and to athletes to build up their prowess. And it's hard to top that as an example of complicity at the highest levels of government. And the result of that, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, was a number of hearings in what then became the unified Germany. Number of people were convicted, physicians were convicted of complicity with the government.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Something's going on.
And a number of people came forth, athletes came forth, telling their stories of how their lives had been ruined by, health-wise, by having been given these drugs to enhance their athletic ability. Then we got baseball, my favorite sport, by the way. But and every year I have to kind of change it because new people keep coming up to this hall of shame, I call it. We can start up there on the left, the upper left, Jose Canseco, who really opened up the box. Jose Canseco was a player, started with the Oakland Athletics and moved around a while, power hitter for a few teams. And he wrote a book, came out around 2002, 2003, I don't remember exactly. But he came out with a book after he retired and named names, snitched, I guess you would say, of people who he knew were using drugs and to whom he had personally given drugs, baseball players. And this caused quite a stir in Major League Baseball. For example, he claimed that Mark McGwire, who was his teammate with the Oakland Athletics back in the mid-'80s, that he started Mark McGwire on the road to using steroids. Now this was big because Mark McGwire in 1998 had broken Roger Maris's home run record. Roger Maris had hit 61 home runs in 1961, and we all remember, those of us who were old enough to remember back then in 1998, McGwire and Sosa, right, Sammy Sosa, both broke the record. McGwire winding up with 70 home runs. And so this was quite a revelation when McGwire was implicated with the drugs. And right after that, Congress got into the act and held hearings on use of steroids in Major League Baseball. And a number of the players who had been named by Canseco, including Canseco himself, were all lined up. You know how they do in a congressional hearing. People they testify, they'll tell the truth and everything. And all of them, except for Canseco, who had already admitted his use of the drugs, they all denied use. Well, now we know after many years that many of them, including McGwire, had in fact used drugs, and many of them later admitted it, which opened up the issue of contempt of Congress, lying to Congress. And Congress is very interested in this. You know why? More so than with football or hockey or basketball. Why is Congress so interested? Well, as a national pastime, at least I'd like to think so, but, you know,
Money tied up in that.
well, there's a lot of money, but few people really realize this today, but, and this goes back about 100 years, actually, to around the 1920s. Baseball was given an exemption from the antitrust acts. The Sherman Antitrust Act, the Clayton Antitrust Act, those go back to the 1890s, and baseball was exempted. It was considered such a sacred, that's my word, but the national pastime, that you couldn't apply the rules that apply to GM and Ford and IBM, Boeing, and others to Major League Baseball. So Congress gets very interested. And there's a lot of people in Congress who would love to deny Major League Baseball its special status of being exempt from antitrust laws.
What does that mean, antitrust laws?
Well, antitrust laws means that, well, let's say, for example, two companies, let's say GM and Ford, okay, take a get together and say, we're two companies, but we're going to control the prices of our products. We're going to control what the consumers have to choose from. That they sort of develop a monopoly. And this goes back to the 1890s, you know, the robber baron age, when big oil, Rockefeller and Steele, Carnegie, when a very few individuals or corporations would monopolize an industry. Basically, baseball has a monopoly. If a team, let's say, well, just put a poor example, but let's say the Pittsburgh Pirates want to move to Detroit to set up a team in competition with the Tigers. The Tigers can veto that. They can say, we do not want a team to be in competition with. It's another way of dealing with the trust sort of thing.
Well, another way to look at that, I mean, in the National Football League, for example, 45 years ago, 50 years ago, there was a National Football League, and then there was this thing called the American Football League that was created because there was not an antitrust exemption. And eventually, those AFL teams rolled into the NFL. So the big NFL that we think of today as both sort of old-timey NFL teams and some things from the American Football League where they were merged. Basketball did that with the National Basketball Association, and someone created the ABA, and they had that red, white, and blue basketball. Maybe you've seen that in some archival footage kind of thing. And the National Basketball Association and the ABA rolled in together to create the big NBA. It's not possible to compete with baseball because of this antitrust exemption. Nobody can say, I think we can come up with a better baseball league because there's an exemption.
Because if the Tigers say we have a monopoly, that's supported by their exemption. And they do. They have the authority to say we won't allow anybody else. We want to keep the monopoly. So anyway.
So baseball breaks the rules, Congress is interested, basically.
Well, Congress doesn't like a lot of people in Congress. They think that the antitrust law should be applied across the board. That what's good for the auto industry, for example, should be good for Major League Baseball. And that's an argument that doesn't surface very much anymore, but that's really what's behind it. Baseball wants to protect it. A lot of people in Congress want to deny them that ability. We have Barry Bonds. We'll talk about Barry Bonds a little bit later, but if you look at his photo on the left down there, when he was a rookie with the Pittsburgh Pirates, slim, but notice how muscular he got over the years. A lot of feeling is that he got muscular by using steroids. And he...
Same thing with McGuire, too. They get huge one season.
Well, look, yeah. I don't have a before and after picture, but he probably did. But McGuire has been certainly controversial. Not McGuire, he's been controversial too, but Barry Bonds even more so, because he holds the all-time home run record. Something like 760. He broke Hank Aaron's record. 763 home runs, lifetime. And I believe he was on the Hall of Fame ballot this past winter for the first time, and he didn't garner enough votes. So there's very little support for him, even though he has those numbers better than a lot of people in the Hall of Fame. And more recently, we had the example of Melky Cabrera, who was then with the San Francisco Giants. He's now with the Toronto Blue Jays. In 2012, he was the most valuable player in the All-Star game. Had a very high batting average at that time. And about a month after the All-Star game, it was discovered that he had been using steroids. So he was suspended for the rest of the season, basically. And then our own Johnny Peralta. That's not a misspelling of his name. It's a strange way to spell Johnny, but Jahani. He got involved with a health clinic, I guess you'd call it, a euphemism, down in Florida called Biogenesis. And this came to light last year. Basically what they were doing was giving steroids and human growth hormone to ball players. And he got caught up in that, along with about a dozen other players who were suspended. Peralta got a 50-game suspension. Last year, he was able to come back to the Tigers in time for the playoffs, but Tigers wanted no part of him after that. They let him go as a free agent, and that didn't stop him from getting a 4-year, $53 million contract with the Cardinals, so go figure.